Are the Maple Leafs going to be active in the forward market on July 1? We'll discuss that and tee up Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final tonight on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Well, now you can with Ultimate Hockey GM. It's completely free, and Locked On listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On NHL in the game store. To download the games, visit hockeygm.app or look it up in the App Store. Ultimate Hockey GM. Start your dynasty. What's going on, Dave? How was your day?
The worst. Like it could not have asked for a worse day.
How much of it was soccer related, and then how much of it was other stuff?
90% soccer related, 10% getting absolutely drenched done in the rain.
Yeah. No, both of those things do suck, and I'm with you on both of those. By the way, watching the Italian game in the afternoon did not go our way, and then obviously Canada, valiant effort against the Argentinians. Honestly, they played great. Maxime Crepeau had 4 or 5 outstanding saves to even keep Canada in it, and they had some chances to score but couldn't finish. Pretty much it was 1-0 until the final couple of minutes against the defending World Cup champs. I actually thought it was quite the valiant effort out of the Canadians at the Copa Americas. Italians, they played like dog crap.
Yeah, that was there were some things said that cannot be shared on this podcast.
Yeah.
I did not wear my Italy jersey. I wore it was almost like this is my black Juve jersey.
So it's
kind of
fault.
No, actually, this is more of me just kind of, this is like a morning sort of attire. I wear the black.
Yeah, but did you wear that during the game?
No, I did not.
Okay. It was funny. My roommate, he was working. He was in the office, and then he came home to make sure that he could get home for the game. And he came home, he was like, not a suit, but I guess he had like a collared shirt and business cash, I guess you could say. And then he goes into his room, and 30 seconds later walks out, totally decked out. He's got the Italian jersey on. He's got like blue pants on, blue shorts on. I'm like, are you going to play? Like, did I miss something here? It was kind of funny. But I will tell you what. What's that? Yeah, they probably could have used them. I'll tell you what, though, like watching not only the Euros, but also the Copa Americas, it's getting me pretty pumped up for the Four Nations Cup next year in hockey. Right? Like, it's been so long since we've had a best on best hockey tournament. And I know it's not technically a 100% true best on best. You're going to have some of the top players not there. Obviously, the Russians being one of the top nations that will not be competing. But we still get to watch some of these players who we've grown up wishing we could see play with one another in a best on best, like Crosby and McDavid, for example, together. And I can't wait for it, right? You'll get to see the Kachucks and Austin Matthews together for Team USA. You'll get to see, some of these blue liners get to play with one another. I'm getting a little fired up for it, that, and I don't know what it is about when your country is playing and when it becomes nationalistic, but it just gets you so fired up, and we haven't had that in hockey in forever, but we're gonna get it next year, and I'm pretty pumped for it, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I've really missed, like, this is the reason why I like this time of year when it comes to the different tournaments that go on. Like, I wasn't even like the biggest Copa America. I didn't really watch them. I got into like a couple years ago. I'm like, this is just a reminder, even though it's not the world's best on best, just to even get your like a regional best on best just shows how much you can really grow the sport and show everybody, like, yeah, this person's good in this league, but like when you put them up against the best in another league, it's a totally different ball game.
Yeah, so like soccer, it's a little different. Whereas I guess the Four Nations Cup, everyone's going to be NHLers. Like that's kind of the point. If they're just taking the, the NHL teams, which I do find hilarious though. Like, let me quickly just get a quick rant in here for one quick second. I've heard so many people, like people I respect, people I know, friends of mine in the industry, who spent a good amount of time, not only at the time, but even like today, ripping on the World Cup tournament back in 2016, the one that they did here in Toronto, right? Ripped on it, said it was goofy. It wasn't really, a best on best, and it didn't have the greatest players. And, they had the under 25 team and it had the Team Europe, and they're like, it was goofy. There's only 4 nations in this one, and it's only NHLers. So it's also not quite a best on best. Like it's similar, but they're praising this tournament like it's the greatest thing ever since the Olympics. And I mean, it is technically, I guess. So that would make sense, but it's really not that much different. I guess instead of there's no U25 team, so you will get to see, even if you're, 21, 22 years old, but you're one of the top Canadians or one of the top Americans, you will make the team, or Sweden or Finland, you will be able to make the team and you'll play for your country as opposed to, Team North America. That part was gimmicky, I suppose, but it's really not going to be all that different because it's all NHLers once again anyway, and no Russians, which makes up a big segment of NHL talent, and certainly is always a very competitive nation in these tournaments. And without them there, not that it weakens it or cheapens it, but you'd wish that if we're gonna get a best on best, you could see one of the best hockey nations be able to compete. I obviously know why they're not competing, and that's kind of what it is. But I don't know, just some rant I randomly wanted to get off my chest.
Well, it's also like I just remember years ago when Sebastian Jovinko was just lighting up MLS, and everybody here thought he would get called up to Italy for even just for the qualifiers. Did not get a call.
No,
and they would even threaten some other players who would go to MLS. This is also when Insigne and Bernardeschi went to MLS, saying, like, kiss your Italian career. Like, you don't expect to play for the Italian team anymore. It kind of speaks to, like, we get so upset about that when those guys get kind of taken and not given those opportunities. And yet we're going to be excluding the players on the other side of the pond that probably deserve at least an opportunity to showcase themselves. And yet the NHL just like, I would like to see, there are probably some players in the KHL or in the SHL. Like, you don't think Sweden would want to include some of the players maybe that are playing overseas potentially on their team?
How many?
Not Canada. We already know Canada.
No, I know, but even Sweden. I mean, most of the I would argue that like the top Swedish players are probably in the NHL.
Majority
like Russia,
of them, right?
You could argue, but most of them are going to be in the NHL.
I think there might be still a few players that like.
How many non-NHL Swedish players were in the played for them at the World Championships?
That's a good question.
Let's look at the World Championships, because that'll answer the answer it for you. If it's all NHLers, clearly they believe that that's where the top talent is.
Let's see here. Oh, there's actually quite there are a couple here I'm already seeing off the top of them.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to see if there's like a list of so I can see where they came from. Oh my god, some of these sites don't do good lists.
No, I know it is
Holy
tough to look at, but
yeah, I mean, just looking at the players here, especially like on the blue line.
Who?
Let's see here.
That blue line was like all NHLers, was it not?
Philip Berglund. Yes,
he was on the World Championship team.
Pardon?
He was on the World Championship team.
Yep. Jesper Sellgren, Tim Heed. Oscar Vandenberg. I don't think he's in the NHL. He's not in the NHL yet.
Mm-hmm.
And there are players like I just looking. I know for a fact that they're from Sweden, but yes, you do see a good crop of NHLers. I'm just saying, some of those teams may want to look at other guys because they might they might be good enough.
Maybe. I don't know. I wouldn't be worried about it too much. But I think a big issue for them is like they're doing it in the middle of the NHL season and they have all the say, right? Like they've got all say in what happens. So I think that's also part of it. I don't think the SHL clubs want to lend out their players for Sweden or Finland or whoever they're going to play for to help make the NHL money. It's an NHL tournament, right? Not a double IHF tournament.
And that's the thing there too. Like the whole idea of like with the Olympics, why the NHL hasn't been going in past years, not just because of COVID, but interrupting the NHL season, having guys get hurt. I remember John Tavares when he went, he got hurt, and it screwed the Islanders.
Yes, it did.
So I totally get that side for sure when you look at why the NHL is kind of pushed on this, but at the same time, you want your best players playing in these tournaments.
Yeah, they're promoting their league. They don't care about the countries, and they don't care. They're promoting their league and their talent at the end of the day. Exactly. So it doesn't surprise me that's how it's going to be. That being said, I'm still going to be very entertained by it, and I'm excited for it, and I can't wait to watch it. Like, I'm not sitting here saying that it's a joke. In fact, I was, trying to say the opposite. I think other people were saying that the other tournament was a joke, but I think I liked it. I thought it was great.
One of my favorite games. One of my favorite games. Team North America versus Sweden. I was at that game.
Great game.
I paid $15 to go to that game.
Oh,
$15. I bought the tickets 30 minutes before puck drop.
Life was so great.
Actually, I used
so great 8 years ago.
I'm pretty sure I used the Game Time app for that one.
There you go. You go. So exactly right. Game Time. They've been around a long while. They're still around. I think I'm excited for it. And like I said, just watching all this country on country, best on best in soccer right now is giving me the itch to watch it in hockey in a couple of months. So I'm excited for the Four Nations Cup. It's like mid-Feb, early to mid-February. Yeah. It's taking place at the All-Star. So there's no All-Star game. Instead, they're going to take the week off and they're going to have this Four Nations Cup. Those are Montreal and Boston? Is that where it's going to be held?
I believe you're right on that.
Yeah, they announced that a couple of weeks ago. That was one of the things I think that
February 12th to the 20th at Bell Center and TD Garden.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Toronto Dominion Garden in Boston.
I was surprised that they didn't do it in Toronto, to be honest with you.
Oh, people have been, up in arms. Another tournament like that in Toronto.
I mean,
they always do well here.
They do great here. I mean, it's going to do fine in Boston and Montreal, but it's not like Toronto's not like the hockey mecca. But anyways, I guess maybe they looked and said, they got in 2016. Let's spread the wealth, perhaps. Anyways, that's not what we plan on talking about today. So apologies for that conversation kind of getting derailed for the first 13 minutes of this podcast. We want to get into what's going on with the Maple Leafs and maybe where their heads might be at as they approach free agency on July 1st. And we take a look at some of the possible options they may have at the forward position. We've talked about defense. We've talked about goaltending. Today, we're going to spend some time, do a little swipe left, swipe right D-man edition, and we'll do that on forward edition, rather. And we'll do that on the other side. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Hey, Locked On Leaf fans, I want to take a moment to bring up one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Do you think you could do better running the Leafs than Brad Treliving or Kyle Dubas? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through seasons and lead it to glory, hire the right coaches and staff, trade players and picks, navigate through free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As a Leaf fan, you know that there is no off-season. GMs are constantly making moves at every point of the year to improve their team's chances, and that's why I think you are going to love this game. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want, when you want. By the way, Locked On listeners you guys can get a 100% free boost to your franchise when using the promo code Locked On NHL in the game store. So make sure you check it out. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app. That's hockeygm.app, or look it up in the App Store. Ultimate Hockey GM. Start your dynasty today. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you, as we are each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. I had a day too, actually. We didn't even get to talk about it.
I was going to ask you about
I want to go get a new phone. I don't know what it is. When me and technology just don't mesh well. No matter what technology it can never go easy for me. Technically, I want to go and get this phone yesterday, and there were complications that I wasn't able to. So I was like, okay, I'll come back and grab it tomorrow. So I came back and I went after the Italy game, and I must have been at the store for like 2 hours trying to figure this out because I had to break my contract with someone else, and then they had to try and port the phone number over, and then there was an issue. They misquoted me something, and then it was just a process. And then when all said and done, they're like, oh, yeah, we're unable to port the number today, and it looks like the server that you were with previously, they're done working. They finished at 7, so we're not going to be able to finish this. Do you mind coming back in tomorrow to finish up your process? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I've been here for 2 hours already, and I can't, like, this phone don't. He's like, they're like, you could take the phone back with you, and you can, go ahead and transfer all your data, and then tomorrow come in and we'll just port the number and we'll get your SIM card up and running, and then you'll be good to go. I'm like, oh my God. So I came home, and it took me like an hour and a half, I think, to transfer all the data from my computer and my backup onto my phone. It was just a crazy hectic day. And on my way back from the mall, I did get stuck in rain as well. So I was, wet shirt walking home. Not a lot of fun. Not fun at all. So, yeah, you and I both, not great days. Not great days, my friend. All right. No one cares about my day and the struggles that I'm going through.
No. Let's talk about Leafs. Let's go.
First world problems. I will say though, the guy who was helping me out was a Leaf fan, and we were talking, and he's like, "Oh, you're Leafs guy?" I was like, "Yeah, and I actually cover the team." He's like, "Oh, no way!" Chat me up about the Leafs the whole time, and then eventually I was like, "Well, if you like talking and listen to Liam, you listen to podcasts?" He's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, check out the Locked On Leafs podcast. Right then and there, went subscribed. So Frank, if you're listening, if you actually did give this a shot, shout out to you. Appreciate the listen. All right, now we can get into our Leafs talk. So I am kind of curious about this, Dave. Like, when we look at the forward market, there's been a lot of discourse about how the Maple Leafs are probably going to be focusing on the back end more so than up front. Like, how active do you expect for them to be in pursuing forwards in free agency? Like, what kind of forwards could they go after? One big fish? Do they need just some depth? Like, what do you expect Brad Treliving to be trying to do and accomplish when it comes to rounding out the forward group through free agency?
Well, it also depends on who's staying and who's going, right? Like, you got Bertuzzi, you got Domi. I might be 2 bodies you have to replace right then and there. Now, you're not going to.
There's another guy, possibly.
Are we talking? We're not talking. Wait on. We talking about Marner? Or are we talking?
Yeah. I mean, doesn't the future of Marner factor into what you're going to do at free agency?
Well, that's it, right? Like, I think you have to look internally at what you're going to do before you look at how, okay, like, you can't map out exactly where you want to go until you kind of plot the journey, right? And so with Marner, that plays a big factor, because I think essentially if you're keeping Marner, I don't see how you keep Bertuzzi and Domi around.
I agree.
And that, to me, signals they might not be going with big fish market, hunting in like the forward department, but they're going to have to go hunting regardless, because they need a centerman. I don't see how this team goes into next year without finding somebody to play in that 3C role.
You don't think Fraser Minton's ready for that role?
I'd be a tough ask, considering I would like for him. It'd be nice if you can get him to do it. I just don't know if that's going to be, especially I don't know what Craig Brewery is going to want from a Fraser Minton, right? So
True.
I would like that, but at the same time, banking on that last year didn't exactly work out well.
Before getting into, and I don't know, maybe this is putting you on the spot because I didn't. This is just a follow-up question, so I know we didn't really prepare for this.
I got
But
throw it at me.
is there a third line center target that you have that's out there in free agency?
Yeah,
Like, is there someone you have in mind? Like, I've got a list of forwards here that I have literally a list of 10 forwards. They're going to play swipe left, swipe right. And I'm looking at my list and I'm like, there's not a single, there's one guy who could qualify as a third line center. That's why, like, the problem is I don't know if that third line center is a position that really can be filled through free agency. They might have to try via the trade or just hope and pray that internally they can get something out of this team. Or the other option is to sign, like a number 2 center, I suppose, and then kick Tavares down to 3C. That is another option that the Maple Leafs could have. Let's just play swipe left, swipe right. We'll go through it, and then you let me know if one of these guys could kind of fit the mold and fit the hole that you're looking to fill, I suppose. We'll start with some of the big guns here, and you let me know if you think the Maple Leafs should be going after these guys. Let's start with Jake Gensel, because he was kind of in the news the other day where if the Maple Leafs move on from Mitch Marner, they're expected to pursue Jake Gensel. Is that a guy? Is that a player when you consider the competition there's going to be for him and how much money you believe that he's going to be asking for? Are you in on Jake Gensel to the Maple Leafs? Swiping left or right here?
I'm swiping left on this. I just think the
eh?
competition is going to be way too like you get rid of Marner. How much less is Jake Gensel going to command over Mitch Marner?
Oh, I would think probably 3-ish million less.
Like that's obviously a nice little obviously it's a nice replacement, but I don't think what does it really solve in terms of what your team needs are?
Well, I mean, he's kind of that guy where you say you sign a centerman, like a top 6 center, and then you move Tavares down. Like, so Jake Gensel could play center, like your number 2 center.
If he's capable of doing that, I'd consider
he's
it.
played center throughout his career, pretty sure, hasn't he? I'm pretty sure he has.
Well, I know in Carolina he didn't play center because I think Kuznetsov was the center on that line.
Mm-hmm. I know he's not typically a center, but I think he's played center in his career.
I think that's what it is for me. Is like it's not his position generally, so I don't know if that makes. I don't know if that makes sense for what I think the Leafs need to do is to go after Gensel.
All right, fair enough. So you're swiping left on Gensel. What about Stammer?
Oh, I'm just weary on the price because I think when you're talking about playoff production, like he is kind of the guy I would really like. I don't think he commands as much just because he's up there in age, and he's also got some the health. I think he played almost the full season last year.
Mm-hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the injury concerns have always been there for me with him.
Here's a very interesting one. Okay. Chandler Stevenson.
Swipe right. That's a player I thought about when you asked me to look at the free agent list. He was the one that popped out for me.
So what does a Chandler Stevenson contract have to look like for you to be okay with it?
Oh, I don't even know what he's making now. I don't think he's making much now.
He wasn't making much, but he was significantly underpaid for years. Like this guy was
he's a late bloomer too, right? I think
big bargain contracts. Well, he wasn't great when he was in Washington, and then he went to Vegas, and he just blossomed into this tremendous, middle 6 second line center who can kind of do everything. I'm a big Chandler Stevenson fan. I actually do believe that I would totally swipe right here, and he would be someone who I'd be going after for sure. If you're looking to get yourself, a middle 6 kind of can play anywhere wing center, can kill penalties, can play on power play. I think Chandler Stevenson plugs any hole you need him to. And I think he plays hockey the right way. He's a proven winner, champion, obviously, with Vegas. He is someone who I'd look at. If you can get him, in and around 5-ish million, like I'm good for that. Like, give me Chandler Stevenson over Tyler Bertuzzi all day long.
Yeah.
All day long.
Yeah, he's a very underrated player. I liked him a lot in Vegas. In a way, a player like him kind of helped save Vegas, right? Because they've kind of, when they made the trade for Eichel, got rid of a lot of their like good depth options.
Yeah.
And Chandler Stevenson was a guy that was brought up to kind of fill the second line center role for a bit. Because William Karlsson I think they put him on the third line, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Stevenson was playing so well, he took soccer. I had him in fantasy hockey at one point. This guy was putting up points like it was
He's killing it. Yeah, like legitimate. I think he had like a 70-point year 2 seasons ago. He did have a little bit of a down year this past season. I think I couldn't tell you why. I didn't watch enough of Vegas to, know if he was playing through injury or if it maybe because, Eichel was actually like the guy all season long and was healthy. So maybe his role changed a little bit, but I still think that Stevenson would be a terrific player. And, if we're talking about John Tavares being a year away from potentially the team moving on from him, Stevenson's a good replacement, a great replacement for JT. And you bring in Stevenson to be your third line center right now. Next year, you can move up and be your second line center. And maybe by then, Fraser Minton's ready to step into that 3C role. And you've got Matthews, Stevenson, Minton, Camp, like you're set down the middle at that point. So it's kind of, looking ahead to the future. So Chandler Stevenson is an interesting one that I want to bring up because I feel like his name's not being brought up a lot. I feel like maybe that's because they're not in on him because everyone else they seem to be in on. But he is a player that checks a lot of boxes and I think would be a terrific addition to the Maple Leafs. We'll see if they agree. We'll see if they contact his agent and try and work out a deal. I don't know. We'll see. Let's take a break and we'll come back and I'll get to some more players. We'll take a look on the wings now. Some more bottom six, middle six kind of players. Some depth, I guess, is another way to call that. So we'll get to those guys on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. We are going through some possible free agent targets for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I believe how many days away are we? 11 days? No, 10 days-ish? How many days? 30 days in September, April, June. Yeah, 10 days. I got to go through the song to figure out how many days are in the month. 10 days away from July 1st from free agent frenzy. So it's fastly approaching. We went through some of the bigger names and possibly talked about if the Leafs could afford to go big buck hunting. I don't think we expect that to be the case. Maybe a middle six forward and then probably maybe a depth guy on top of it. So let's talk about some of the other players. And this is a name that is kind of making the rounds as a possibility. And it's Dakota Joshua, who had a big breakout year for the Vancouver Canucks. I'm hearing some decently high numbers, though, for what he might be looking for. A Mason Marchman kind of contract. I believe in the $4 million range. Like, you swiping left or swiping right if that's what Joshua's camp is looking for.
Yeah, I'm swiping left. I like the player, hate the price. Like it's like one of those, you're going down the grocery aisle and you're just like, I'd really like to have this for dinner, but I don't know if I want to spend that much on it.
Yeah, the T-bones. He's the T-bone steak.
Yeah. He's not the tomahawks, he's the T-bone.
He's the T-bone. Yeah. Honestly, it's tough.
You just have to be very careful because look at what Vancouver is doing in the position right now. One of the reasons why they might not be able to bring back Dakota Joshua is because Ilya Mikheyev, they made that deal a couple years ago, and they're trying to get out from under it. And
yeah, he was overpaid the second he left Toronto. I mean, there's a reason why the Leafs let him walk because he wanted that number, and the Leafs were like, no. Thank God they did. Ciao. Enjoy Western Canada. Have fun. Dakota Joshua, though, like, I don't know, man. I like what you saw him do in the playoffs. That's pretty special. Like, he was a force to be reckoned with in the playoffs for the Vancouver Canucks. Like, there was a few games where he stood out as the guy. Like, we're talking Vancouver, Edmonton, best player in the game, Dakota Joshua. Like, that's the type of player that we're talking about here. Dakota Joshua was terrific in a couple of those games against the Nashville Predators. When we talk about playoff performers and wanting to add guys who play playoff style hockey, the way that you play and win in the playoffs, Dakota Joshua checks the boxes, man. So I might be willing to actually spend up on this guy because I think I get it. He's probably not going to be a top 6 player for you, but I think he could definitely sit there and be a great forechecking third line guy for you who can add some offense. And we talked about, the bottom 6 not adding enough offense. This guy had 18 goals in like 55 games this year in the regular season. Like, he was on pace for over 20 goals, like almost 25 goals if he played 82 games. I think that's worth $4 million. If you can get 20 goals out of Dakota Joshua and have him go and lay 200 hits, get into a couple of fights, be an absolute forecheck, backcheck nightmare for the opposition. And actually, just thought about this, Dakota Joshua played under Craig Berube.
I was just about to bring that up, actually.
I like when they were in St. Louis. So I kind of like the thought of a reunion there. I think I'd swipe right if Joshua's if you could get him a little lower, like $4 million might be a tad high, but there's
if you can get him at 3.5, 3.5
all day, 3.5.
Because I would take a Dakota Joshua over a Tyler Bertuzzi.
Well, think about it. Barclay Goodrow signed 3.6 like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, Dakota Joshua is a better player than Barclay Goodrow. And you just saw the Sharks take that contract on willingly, $3.6 million. So you don't think Joshua could be worth $4 million with the cap going up? He might be, man. He might be. But he's an interesting one. Definitely someone I think the Maple Leafs want. It's going to depend on the price tag.
I just think a lot of teams are kicking. I heard like double-digit number of teams are interested.
Yeah, exactly. Just goes to show how good of a player he is, right? Anthony Beauvillier. Swipe left, swipe right.
Oh, swipe left.
What about Anthony Beauvillier if he's coming in on like
he has
$1.5 million?
He has $1.5 million. Like that's a player who
would you sign Anthony Beauvillier to a PTO?
Oh yeah, I would for sure. Like they had some who's the player they signed to a PTO this past year with the Marlies? It actually did very well. For another former kind of first round pick that didn't really work out. Used to be an Islander.
PTO?
Yeah, he played with the Marlies.
Kiefer Bellows.
Yeah, like he did pretty well for the Marlies. Like I was kind of hoping maybe he would have gone a little bit of an audition with the Leafs. Like Beauvillier correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think he did too bad when he got to Nashville eventually.
Yeah, he started the year in Vancouver, and then they traded him to Chicago, and then he ended up in Nashville at the deadline.
So I think, and yeah, I mean, with Nashville, he wasn't exactly a big time player for them. If the deal is really cheap, again, I consider it because that's a guy who could also play center. I just don't know if he is the type of player this team needs. I feel like you can just use the money best spent elsewhere.
Sean Monahan.
I'm gonna swipe left just because I think that's like he's now put himself higher than what I expected. Like when Montreal made that trade to Winnipeg, I thought Winnipeg overpaid. But then the guy turned into like their second line center.
Is he still that? Is he a second line center? Like
I don't think he
was
is.
The one
He's
player when I
third,
said, "Oh, there's one guy who could be your 3C." It was Sean Monahan.
I think like as 3C, he does exactly what you need. You know, he's a gamer. He did very well in Winnipeg. That fit was very seamless. I just don't know. He's not going to want 3C money. He's going to want 2C money, and that's costly, especially for a guy who has not. Like you want to talk about a guy who's struggled with injuries. He's kind of the poster child of it, unfortunately.
All right, last one. This is a player. We talk about the Maple Leafs and their lack of goal scoring come playoff time. Someone who scored a lot of goals in the playoffs. He scored a lot of goals in the regular season. I believe, yes, he's won a Stanley Cup. Yes, he won a Stanley Cup as well. Tyler Toffoli.
You know what? I think that's a player the Leafs have always low-key had interest in. We know that Brad Living liked him a lot.
He traded for Tyler Toffoli once upon a time.
Yes, he did. And I have really liked Tyler Toffoli. He's 32, so yeah, he's a little up there in age. But when he went to New Jersey, he was fantastic for them, right? Like I know they gave away Sharon Govich. I think that was the deal that they made.
Yeah.
So like New Jersey kind of kicks themselves because they gave up a good young player. But Toffoli was like, even when he went to Winnipeg, he was a good player there too. If you can get him at the right deal, I know he played some time at center. I don't think that's his.
He's a winger.
He's a winger. Like he's a guy in the playoffs. Will produce.
And like he's like for a guy who scores, like he also has in the past been a pretty decent penalty killing option as well. So it's not just a goal scorer. He can also kill some penalties for you too and give you some more added value to his game. So
it's also like you think about the coach he would be playing for in Craig Berube. This guy played for Daryl Sutter.
Now, yeah, true. Now, I will say this. I don't see Toffoli being an option if they keep Marner. But if they move on from Marner, Toffoli is a great, like you're never going to replace Marner 1-for-1, but like he's a good start to replacing him. A guy who can score goals, a forward who can kill penalties, who can play in your top six. And I don't think he's going to cost a whole lot. I would imagine, he's not going to be cheap, don't get me wrong. But at his age, depending on term, I suppose, I can't see him costing much more than 5.5 on like a 2 or 3 year deal. So
yeah, I know he's at the point now where I just don't think he struck pretty rich on his on the deal. I think he signed with Montreal. I think that's the deal he played on when he was in Calgary. He's the type of player I would want in the playoffs for sure.
Is there anyone else? Because you end up.
I'll bring up the name. You kind of poo pooed the idea yesterday, but I'll bring up Jake DeBrusk because that's a name we've heard.
No.
So
go bring up Jake DeBrusk's stats. Like he's had one good season. Dave.
Well, no, but Mike, he's a Leaf killer. So if you bring in a Leaf,
he's gonna kill the Leafs.
Go to it somewhere.
That's how it works. He just he's going to continue to kill the
He
Leafs.
is like
Just like Alex Galchenyuk. Undercover, no chance. No way. Undercover Bruin in a Leaf uniform is going to probably score a goal on Joseph Wall.
That's like
Game
the same
7
people that
overtime.
want Josh Anderson from Montreal because he always plays well against the Leafs. And I'm like, all right, well, what about the other, 70 something games he plays?
Yeah, if Josh Anderson could remain healthy, he would be a very intriguing player.
Oh, yeah.
But he just can't ever stay healthy ever.
All right. I'll bring up a couple players quickly here. Anthony Mantha.
I had him on my list. I'm probably swiping left on Mantha.
He's a big player that doesn't play big, and that's not
Yeah,
great.
I don't think he'd mesh with Craig Berube. I'll say this, again, it's the Leafs don't necessarily have a lot of holes up front.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously you're looking at, I guess, a third line center and a top 6 winger. That's ultimately the 2 holes that are on this team. So
I got one more here. So I've heard this name too being brought up to me.
Okay.
David Perron.
I like David Perron. He's won a lot of games. He's been pretty solid throughout his career. I just don't think that's what the Leafs need right now. I don't know how much longer Perron's what, 34, 35? He's pretty old.
He is. Well, I mean, you can ask his agent. We got one blank on the air. Agent right now.
Now, David Perron does have a history with Craig Berube as well.
He's 36. He won the cup with Berube when they were in St. Louis. Fantastic in that run. 16 points in 26 games.
I mean, this without saying, I suppose it would depend on the contract. If he wants to come and try and win a cup in Toronto on a cheap deal, then yeah, okay. He wants $1 million. Okay, yeah, I'm cool with that one. But if he's gonna want a market deal, probably not.
Alan Walsh. I that's his agent. So I'm wondering if Alan Walsh also is he's gonna want. I mean, he's not an easy agent to work with in terms of he's very out there with, especially David Perron. Anytime David Perron does anything, you always see the message from Alan Walsh
Twitter account. Yeah, very active agent on Twitter. Isn't it weird how an agent has his own podcast where he talks about the league and about his players? And I find it so bizarre that he just actively talks about things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, guess it's not impacting the bottom line, I suppose. All right, buddy, good stuff. Who do you think wins tonight? Oilers, Panthers, Game 6. Is it over, or are we coming back to tee up a Game 7?
I'm so conflicted on this.
I think we're coming back to tee up a Game 7, buddy.
I'm leaning towards that. My head is saying McDavid he's McDaviding right now.
He's at another level. He is commanding.
And it's just and you always have to can they do it 2 more times? What they've done.
That's it. It's not 4 times in a row. Can you just win 2 more games? You just got to win 2. How many times did they win 2 games this year? Plenty times did they win back-to-back games. They just got to do it once more. One more time. Win 2 straight games, and you're Stanley Cup champions. It'd be unbelievable. But the way that McDavid's hit another level, but it's something. It's something to marvel. I'm excited for it, and I want to watch him in Game 6, and then I want to watch and see if he can hit another level in a Game 7. We deserve that as hockey fans. All right, that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcast platforms, including up on YouTube, and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys on Monday. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you then. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.